A relentless sun threw long shadows over the barren trail as the Pistolero rode hard against the biting wind, the only sound his boots crunching brittle earth. Ahead, a twisted shape caught his eye. An Apache girl, cruelly crucified on a makeshift wooden frame. Tacked beneath her, a jagged sign read, "Return when you're white." The brutal message, carved as deeply as the nails that pinned her. A raw scream of hatred in this unforgiving land. His blood ran cold, heart pounding with a mixture of anger and despair. Here, at the edge of civilization, justice was today a ghost, and the girl's silent eyes held a plea that shattered his hardened soul. Around him stretched the frontier's vast expanse, scorching dust swirling beneath an endless sky that bled with the afternoon heat. Dusty hills rolled away into jagged silhouettes, hosting an eerie stillness broken only by the low whistle of wind through cracked sagebrush. The air itself was heavy with the weight of loneliness and menace, where every gust seemed to whisper stories of loss and violence. This was no place for mercy, yet the sight before him demanded it. The Pistolero reined in his horse, muscles taut beneath weather-beaten skin. Years spent chasing shadowed foes had taught him to bury feelings beneath a veneer of cold resolve. But today, the familiar hardness cracked. The girl's suspended form was not just a warning. It was a mirror reflecting the deep wounds festering between cultures. His thoughts swirled. Could he afford compassion, or would intervening spell his doom? He wondered silently about the line he had crossed, or might yet cross, between hunter and guardian. What fury, what fear, must have driven men to desecrate a child's life in such a violent spectacle? This was no random act. It was a message, a provocation that promised fire and blood. The crucifixion itself was a spark thrown into the tinderbox of hatred, threatening to ignite a war far beyond this dusty trail. The Pistolero knew that a decision loomed before him: to turn away and survive in cold silence, or to face the storm beckoning from the horizon. Caught in the oppressive silence, he studied the girl's empty gaze. The wind stirred a faint whisper, like the breath of ghosts long dead. Then from the edge of the butte, movement, a flicker among the rocks. His eyes snapped to the distance where shapes coalesced. Warriors, painted with earth and blood, stoic shadows etched against the dying light. They stood still, watching him with unseen eyes, their presence charging the air with electric threat and unspoken challenge. At the same moment, the soft thunder of hooves approached, echoes from settlements or vengeance seekers closing the net. Heart hammered, the Pistolero gripped his reins tighter. Whatever path he chose, the quiet days were ending. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. The cycle of hatred would not halt until someone dared step beyond it. In that haunting instant, the line between enemy and protector blurred, and the story of the frontier twisted into something new and unforgiving. Many travelers who follow the tales of these unforgiving lands have told us that fate, or YouTube's sly algorithm, sometimes untangles their subscriptions without warning. Before the next perilous trail is revealed and a new turn unfolds, take a moment right now to check below this video and make sure you're still signed up with our band. We don't want you to miss a single voice echoing through this wild frontier. Check your subscription now and join our saga. The shadows lengthened as the first whispers of dusk crept over the barren landscape. The Pistolero's grip on the reins tightened, his gaze locked on the group of painted figures perched on the rocky outcrop. Their eyes, dark and unblinking, pinned him like 1,000 needles. Each breath he took tasted of dust and danger, mingled with the heavy weight of the girl's silent plea. The silence stretched, taut as a rusted wire. Then one figure moved, a slight shift, deliberate and slow. A warrior stepped forward. The blood-red paint streaked across his chest, a carved spear resting lightly on his shoulder. He was no stranger to loss, no stranger to this unforgiving soil, and his gaze bore the deep sorrow and fierce fire of a people betrayed. She was one of ours. His voice broke the stillness like a cracked bell. Low and trembling, yet unyielding, they crossed a line no man should ever cross. The Pistolero's mind spiraled through the flames of 1,000 past conflicts, memories etched in bones and scars. Yet here, faced with such raw brutality, the old reprieves of vengeance seemed hollow. A responsibility pressed on. His chest heavier than the weight of his revolver. To turn away would be to let the darkness win, not just for the girl, but for whatever shred of humanity yet lingered on this ragged frontier. A sudden crack in the air marked the arrival of more hooves, close, fast. The Pistolero pivoted his horse, muscles coiling with the instinct born of countless near deaths. From the valley below, a group emerged, settlers or bounty hunters, their faces hidden beneath dust-streaked hats, guns glinting like cold promises. They brought with them the stench of bloodlust and retribution, voices sharp with accusation and law, a chorus that left no room for mercy. The warrior's companion, a stoic woman with fierce eyes aflame beneath a scarred brow, laid a steady hand on his arm. "We do not seek war," she hissed, voice cracked but resolute. "But this will be answered, one way or another." Her gaze flicked to the crucified girl, and pain twisted her face for a brief, fragile moment. This land drinks in our suffering. Some debts cannot be repaid without blood. The Pistolero swallowed hard, feeling the unyielding wind swallow his breath. His thoughts raced. Could he protect a cause both alien and intimate, born from wounds he could neither forget nor fully understand? Was there still room for grace in this relentless land? Or was survival now a grim reckoning, where mercy was a luxury long out of reach? He dismounted slowly, boots crunching against brittle earth as he approached the motionless girl. His eyes caught the faintest movement. A breath caught. The drama of life clinging in a fragile shimmer beneath the cruelty. Anguish and defiance warred in her still form. The Pistolero's jaw clenched. Whatever fate had bound her here, it now tethered his own. Behind him, the painted warriors readied themselves, weapons drawn, but held with a patience born of generations. The new riders closed in, faces hardened, ready to enforce the frontier's brutal law. The tension stretched taut, fragile as a spider's web under a hammer's weight. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the standoff. a rifle shot echoing from beyond the hill. Horses reared, shouts tore through the air, chaos sparking like lightning. The Pistolero's eyes darted to a figure darting from the shadows, a small boy, no older than 10, his face smeared with dirt and determination. He sprinted toward the crucified girl, clutching something wrapped in worn cloth. The warriors surged forward, voices snarling in Apache tongues, the cadence fierce and raw. The settlers called back in angry English, lines drawn beneath the bruised sky. The Pistolero released a long-held breath, muscles coiled into motion. He thrust his body between the boy and the riders, voice steeled. "Back!" he commanded, eyes blazing with desperate authority. The boy faltered, but pressed on, each step a testament to courage beyond his years. The wrapped bundle slipped from his grasp as he neared the girl, and the Pistolero instinctively caught it, a small flask, stained and cracked. In that suspended moment, the land itself seemed to tilt, time warping between the pull of past grievances and the fragile possibility of mercy. The Pistolero uncapped the flask, the faint scent of sage and bitter herbs rising. Gently he poured the liquid between the girl's cracked lips, watching for any spark of life. Her eyelids fluttered. A low, guttural cry escaped her, shaky but alive. The warriors murmured in awe, some releasing breaths held tight for too long. The settlers' faces hardened with new uncertainty. "You've done more than I would have dared," the female warrior said, voice trembling with reluctant respect. The Pistolero met her gaze, steel softening to something almost hopeful. "There's a line worth crossing," he said, "even in this land of ghosts." But before the fragile truce could solidify, a shadow loomed overhead, dark, vast, and sudden. A hawk, sharp-eyed and circling, let loose a piercing cry that sliced through the tension like a blade. Its gaze lingered on the crucified girl, as if carrying a message no living soul dared speak aloud. The Pistolero's heart sank as a cold realization settled deep. The shadow that circled was not just a bird, but a herald. More than vengeance, more than blood, it was a summons. Something far greater, far darker, awaited them beyond the horizon. And in that moment, as the sun bled out behind the mountains, the Pistolero knew the fragile line between hunter and guardian was about to shatter forever. The rifle shot shattered the brittle silence, its echo racing across the valley like a thunderclap. Horses reared and scattered. Voices tore through the dusk with desperate, angry cries. The painted warriors tensed, muscles coiled beneath earth-streaked skin, eyes sharp as obsidian blades. The settlers, guns drawn, faces grim beneath dust-streaked hats, lowered weapons just enough to scan the chaos. The Pistolero dropped from his mount, boots crunching dry earth, and threw himself between the onrushing boy and the merging groups. Back. His voice was steel, rimmed with urgency, but there was more in it, a brittle edge of conviction that forbade challenge. The boy faltered, then pressed faster forward, clutching the battered bundle. The Pistolero's fingers closed around the cloth as it slipped free, exposing a cracked flask, its surface dull with age. With a breath steeped in the weight of 1,000 lost causes, he uncapped the vessel and tilted it toward the girl's cracked, bleeding lips. The faint aroma of sage and bitter herbs struck the air, fragile as a whispered prayer. Her lids fluttered. A weak, ragged sob tore free. A thread of life stubbornly wound around despair. The warriors exhaled in a collective storm of relief and disbelief, while the settlers' tense lines flickered in uncertain shock. The woman among the Apache stepped closer, eyes smoldering, not in anger, but in something raw and hard-won. "You've done more than many would have dared." Her voice was a low hiss, cracks betraying the years of grief. Beneath her steely exterior, the Pistolero met her gaze, the cold that had settled deep in his bones shifting imperceptibly towards something that bore the fragile contours of hope. "There's a line worth crossing," he said quietly, "even in this land stained with ghosts." The tension wavered, breaths drawn tight, as fragile accords began to form in the shadows. Yet the heavy silence shattered again, a sweeping shadow cast over them all. Above, a hawk sliced the failing light, its sharp cry tearing through the charged air like a blade. Its gaze lingered long and solemn on the crucified girl, as though bearing a message no living soul dared speak. The Pistolero's heart sank, a bitter chill settling deep. This was no ordinary omen. The hawk's flight was a summons, a herald beyond retribution or raw vengeance, a whisper of a gathering storm far darker than this ragged confrontation. His eyes flicked back to the surrounding warriors. A low murmur rose in Apache tongues, warnings laced with sorrow and iron resolve. The settlers tensed, fingers tightening on weapons, as the inevitability of blood edged closer. The boundary between hunter and guardian blurred further into shadow beneath the blood-red sun. The boy's small figure suddenly disappeared behind a jagged boulder, re-emerging with hurried breath and eyes wide with fear. He dropped beside the girl, hefting the cloth-wrapped bundle once more. Panic, mingled with fierce determination, was etched in every line of that young face. The Pistolero's gaze pinned him. This child carried a spark, fragile but fierce. From the rocky ridge, the warrior's leader shouted orders, low and commanding. Some moved to flank the settlers, while others formed a protective circle around the girl and boy, weapons primed but held in patient restraint. Then, without warning, a figure burst from the tree line nearby, boots pounding the cracked earth. The newcomer was a young man, gaunt and dust-covered, eyes blazing with desperation, a pistol swinging at his hip. His breath hitched mid-curse as he took in the scene, a fragile ceasefire trembling on edge, poised on a blade's tip. "Wait!" the Pistolero shouted, his voice slicing through the rising chaos. "No more blood today." His hand hovered above his holster, but he made no move to draw. The newcomer's gaze darted between the two groups, calculating the odds with quicksilver mind. Then, as if resigned to the storm they'd been caught in, he stepped forward, lowering his weapon just slightly. "They're coming," he snarled, voice hard as flint. "More of 'em, riders from the south. Heard word of the girl. They want her gone, dead or alive." A cold wind washed through the clearing, carrying the scent of smoke and danger. The Pistolero's jaw clenched. The woman beside the leader's side tightened her grip on a war club, face a mask of fierce determination, tempered by grief. The boy shifted, clutching the bundle protectively. Curiosity and dread warred in the Pistolero's mind. What secret did that worn cloth conceal? A medicine A token? Or something deadly that could change the tide? Suddenly, a flicker at the perimeter caught his senses. A shadow moving too fast for the dying light. "Get ready," the warrior growled, voice low and tight. "Tonight the land will claim us all, or we rise from the ashes." The settlers muttered curses under their breath, glances flicking to each other as their resolve hardened. The pistolero felt the old hunger of survival claw beneath his ribs, the primal urge to protect, to fight, to endure. But beneath it all, something new fluttered, a fragile, dangerous hope that even here where hatred had drawn blood so often, some thread of mercy might yet be woven into the story. The boy suddenly burst into a run, slipping past the tense circle. His shadow danced erratically over the ground as he disappeared toward a narrow path leading deeper into the hills. "Wait!" The pistolero's shout was swallowed by the rising wind. No one moved. He caught the flash of the woman's eyes, a silent plea to pursue, to protect, to somehow keep the fragile spark alive. And then, just as the boy vanished over the ridgeline, the earth trembled beneath them. The first rumble of hooves thundered closer, not just the riders from the south, but a force swelling like a storm tide, bringing with it the fury of a frontier that never forgave. The pistolero raised his eyes to the horizon, heart pounding. Between the crashing shadow of vengeance and the willow-thin hope in the girl's eyes lay a choice no man could avoid. But the choice would no longer be his alone. From the darkening expanse emerged a chilling silhouette, draped in tattered robes, face hidden, bearing no weapon but an ancient staff carved with symbols forgotten by time. The desert held its breath, and the harbinger whispered, the reckoning was at hand. The air hung thick as the hawk's cry faded into the dying daylight, but its ominous shadow still clung to the clearing. The pistolero's chest heaved, each breath heavy with the weight of choices that no man wished to face. Around him, the painted warriors tightened their formation, eyes sharp beneath streaks of blood-red paint, yet holding to a fragile restraint born of shared grief. The settlers, dust clinging in clumps to tired faces, mirrored the tension, their fingers twitching near gun butts, but frozen by the raw edge of the moment. The boy's footsteps echoed softly as he nimbly slipped back into the circle, clutching the cloth-wrapped bundle with desperate care. His wide eyes met the pistolero's, flickering with a strange mix of pleading and fierce resolve. The girl's shallow breaths whispered life from her shattered body, each one a fragile thread dangling between hope and oblivion. A tense silence swallowed the valley. Then, with a subtle movement, the stoic woman with fierce eyes shifted forward. Her gaze locked on the pistolero. "What you did, it wasn't just mercy," she said, her voice low and edged with layers of distrust and reluctant respect. "You crossed a border we all fear, but one we sometimes must." He nodded, swallowing the lump rising in his throat. The lines the world had drawn between them, between Apache and settler, hunter and guardian, all blurred here beneath the heavy sky. Yet the enmity simmered just below the surface, a slow-burning flame, threatening to flare. The sound of hoofbeats again, this time more distant, but closing fast, pressed urgency into the thickening dusk. More riders, drawn by bloodlust or duty, closing in with the moon's rising promise of shadow and chaos. The settlers readied their weapons. Some whispered prayers, others cursed the coming storm. The warriors gripped their spears and war clubs tighter, eyes gleaming with a steely patience honed through generations of loss and survival. "What's in that bundle?" the Pistolero asked quietly, nodding toward the boy's grasp. The youth's lip trembled, but he answered with a fierce whisper. "Medicine from the healers, old remedies, to save her if we can." The Pistolero glanced down at the flask he still held, the bitter scent of sage lingering in the air like a ghost's breath. This fragile thread of life rested not just on ancient herbs, but on the slimmest chance that mercy might tip the scales. A sudden movement caught his eye beyond the ridge, a figure cloaked in shadows, edging closer with unnatural silence. The Pistolero's hand instinctively brushed near his holster, but the gesture was slow, deliberate. Whoever approached was no ordinary rider. A voice carried across the tension, low and grave. "This land doesn't forget." Heads turned sharply to the figure, now visible in the failing light. A tall, gaunt man draped in tattered robes, eyes hidden beneath a deep hood. His presence was a chill whisper from forgotten times. His staff carved with symbols older than the scars on the earth beneath them. The warriors stiffened. The settlers shifted uneasily. Fear rippled through the group, a recognition of something darker than any mortal feud, an ancient reckoning stirring beneath the dust and blood. The Pistolero stepped forward, voice steady though his heart hammered. "Who are you? What winds bring you here?" The man's voice was a rasp, barely more than wind threading through dry leaves. "I am the shadow that walks between worlds. I carry the burden of what comes when men forget their debts to this land and to each other." A cold gust swept through the clearing, raising dust into swirling eddies. The crucified girl's eyes fluttered weakly, locking on the stranger for a fleeting moment. Fear, pain, and something else. A glimmer of fate entwined with the unknown. The woman warrior broke the fragile silence. "If what you bring is doom, we stand ready. But if there is a way to end this cycle, speak." The man stepped closer, staff tapping cracked earth with measured weight. "The blood spilled here is but a herald. Beyond the horizon, forces gather. Not tribal quarrels, not settler claims, but a darkness that will test the land itself. Only those willing to step beyond old hatreds can hope to survive." The Pistolero's gaze fell on the boy, still clutching the bundle, a fragile spark beneath the looming shadow. Around them, the tension coiled tighter, every soul caught in the electric haze of impending storm. Suddenly, the boy's grip faltered. The cloth slipped to the ground, revealing a small, weathered charm, a wolf's fang suspended on a braided leather thong. The Pistolero caught it mid-fall, the weight, foreign, yet oddly significant in his palm. "What is this?" he asked the boy, whose eyes brimmed with silent questions. "It's from my mother," the youth whispered. She said it would bring protection. Now it's all I can give her. A faint murmur rippled through the warriors as the woman spoke. Softly, the wolf's fang is a sacred talisman, protector and omen. To carry it now is to accept a burden heavier than any sword. The pistolero clasped the charm, feeling a strange warmth pulse faintly through his fingers, like the land itself reaching through time and blood. The distant hoofbeats grew louder, shadows stretching into furious shapes beneath the rising moon. The settling calm fractured. Riders poured over the ridge with savage cries, gunshots sparking fire into the night. With a grim set to his jaw, the pistolero drew his revolver, stance hardening like tempered steel. The warriors rallied around him, forming a fierce wall between life and death. The crucified girl, her life clinging by threadbare hope, breathed shallow and faint. The boy held close, eyes scanning the chaos with trembling. Courage! The air cracked with violence. The savage cries, the gunfire's roar, the pounding hooves, a brutal symphony destined to etch new scars. But beneath the furious storm, the pistolero clutched the wolf's fang tight, whispering through cracked lips, "If mercy is the line that saves us, then I will walk it through hell." And just as the first bullet tore through the night air, a chilling scream rose from the shadows. The girl's eyes snapped open wide, revealing not fear, but a fierce, burning light. The frontier's fragile balance shattered in that instant. And somewhere beyond the chaos, the ancient shadow smiled. The rifle crackled again, sharper this time, slicing the fragile ceasefire like shattered glass. Dust erupted beneath pounding hooves as riders surged over the ridge, eyes burning with the hunger for vengeance. The settlers tightened their ranks, guns rising in trembling hands, lips drawn into grim lines that betrayed no mercy. Among the warriors, a ripple of tension coursed like lightning. Spears raised, war clubs gripped, muscles coiled in silent readiness. The pistolero's jaw clenched, breath caught in the thundering rhythm of his heartbeat. Around him, the world seemed to tilt on an axis of peril and fragile hope. The crucified girl's shallow breath mingled with the thickening dust, the faintest pulse, a threadbare defiance clinging to frail bones. The boy's grip on the bundle tightened, knuckles white, eyes wide with a fire only desperation could kindle. From the shadows, the cloaked figure stepped forward, staff tapping the cracked earth with deliberate weight. The robes, tattered and stained by time and turmoil, whispered stories older than the blood spilled here. Though his face remained hidden beneath a deep hood, the air trembled with unspoken power, a chill that seeped into the bones of every soul present. "You bring shadows where light falters," the pistolero said, voice low but unwavering, muscles poised beneath weathered skin. "Tell us, is this darkness our doom, or a reckoning we must face?" The figure's voice was a rasp, threading ancient dust through the evening air. Neither doom nor salvation lies in the hand of man alone. The land remembers. The blood spilled here stirs the restless. Forces beyond tribes, beyond laws forged by men. His staff traced a slow arc in the air, casting long shadows that danced with the dying light. This crucifixion is but a spark, Soon the plains will burn with more than ancient hatred. A cold wind snaked through the circle, rustling the ragged cloaks and stirring the stale scent of sage, still clinging faintly to the flask the pistolero held. The warriors exchanged glances weighted with shared memories and unspoken fears. The settlers whispered anxious prayers, voices swallowed by the rolling dusk. The boy suddenly stepped forward, eyes locked to the cloaked man's, trembling but resolute. "The medicine I carry is not enough," he said, voice breaking. "She needs more, something stronger, something beyond herbs." The woman warrior tightened her jaw, stepping beside the boy. "There are old ways, forgotten paths." Her gaze pierced the horizon, where shadows swelled like a gathering storm. "But to walk them demands a price not all are willing to pay." The pistolero shifted, the weight of his revolver a familiar anchor against the chaos. His gaze flicked to the wavering edges of the valley, where more riders approached, faces lost in dust and hatred, their cries rising like a tempest. The line between savior and hunted thinned until it nearly vanished. Suddenly, a sharp cry rent the air, not human, but primal. The hawk returned, sweeping low with wings that beat notes of warning into the blood-red sky. Its talons clutched a tattered piece of leather, fluttering as it dropped toward the ground near the crucified girl. The pistolero's hand caught the scrap, a weathered totem, carved with symbols of protection bestowed by the Apache elders. Recognition flickered in the woman warrior's eyes, shadowed with a sorrow deeper than words. "This is a summons," she whispered, voice threading the night. "An old call to arms, tied to spirits and blood oaths. The land calls forth those bound by destiny, and the hour grows near." The boy's breath hitched, the charm around his neck, a wolf's fang twinging against his chest, a fragile symbol of guardianship and sacrifice, faintly pulsing beneath the storm's gathering gloom. The pistolero's lips parted, voice hoarse yet steady. "If the land demands reckoning, then we must choose. Stand as guardians, or be consumed by the fire." Farther down the ridge, the newcomers closed ranks, guns raised and eyes burning with cold intent. A shot cracked loose, echoing like a death knell. Horses reared, and chaos ignited in the dusty valley as sparks of violence exploded. Time slowed, breath caught in the moment before hell broke loose. Then, from the shadows behind the warriors, a sudden cry, not fierce, but terrified. The boy stumbled, clutching his chest where a dark stain spread beneath his fingers. His eyes locked with the pistolero's for a fleeting second, a silent plea swirling beneath sudden pain. The pistolero lunged, catching the boy's faltering form before he could collapse. Blood blossomed through his fingers, stark and furious against the dying light. "No," the pistolero breathed, heart shattering under the weight of inevitability. Around them, the battle's roar swelled. The circle fractured, warriors and settlers thrown into desperate skirmishes beneath the bruised sky. The cloaked figure lifted his staff, voice rising above the cacophony. "The reckoning has begun. Only those bound by the old blood and new courage will see dawn." The pistolero's eyes burned with grim resolve. He cradled the boy close, clutching the wolf's fang hanging from the youth's neck. "If mercy is our only weapon," he whispered, voice raw, "then I'll wield it through hell's own gates. The crucified girl's eyes fluttered open wide, no longer vacant, but blazing with fierce light. A scream tore free, raw and unyielding, echoing across the valley like a battle call. And beneath the blood-streaked heavens, the fragile truce shattered into a storm of gunfire and lightning shouts. The frontier's unforgiving heart began to beat louder. But far beyond the clamor, where shadows curled around ancient rocks, a cold whisper stirred, the harbinger's warning, lingering in the wind. The wolf's fang pulsed softly against the Pistolero's palm, and the land waited for the wolves to rise. The wind's bite sharpened as the Pistolero stood frozen beneath the swaying figure of the Apache girl, her silent eyes gazing into the distance, as if pleading for a reckoning only the land could grant. Around him, the painted warriors remained statuesque upon jagged rocks, muscles wound tight, breath held like a secret waiting to break free. The weight of countless unseen stories hung heavy, loss, rage, survival, all coiled in this charged moment. From the valley's edge, the rumble of approaching horses grew, a staccato drumbeat of inevitability. Dust devils kicked up in their wake, turning barren earth into swirling torrents that blurred the harsh lines between settler and native, hunter and hunted. The settlers descended, grim-faced and gun-ready, their eyes narrow slits of suspicion and fury as they took in the scene. For them, the girl was a symbol of defiance that could not be tolerated. For the warriors, she was a sacred bond, wrought in blood and pain. The Pistolero's breath hitched. He shook off the stale resignation that had long been his refuge and stepped forward, voice low but unwavering. This ends here. No more blood spilled over a child. The woman warrior stepped down from the rock, her fierce gaze meeting his. You cross a line by calling for peace, stranger. But sometimes the land demands more than hatred. A flicker of movement burst from the shadows. A small boy, eyes wide, with a fiery resolve beyond his years, clutching a tightly wrapped bundle. Pressed to his chest, his steps faltered as he neared the girl, the raw ache of urgency pulsing in every exhausted breath. The Pistolero moved beside him, catching the worn flask that slipped free amid the chaos. He uncapped it gently, the bitter scent of sage stirring the air, the ancient medicine of the land whispering stories of healing and hope. Tenderly, he brought the liquid to the girl's cracked lips. Her eyelids trembled and slowly lifted, revealing a flicker of life amid the torment. Around them, the tense atmosphere softened for a heartbeat. The warriors lowered their weapons, the settlers paused in uneasy silence. But the fragile pause shattered as a piercing hawk's cry tore through the sky, its shadow casting an omen over them all. The Pistolero's heartbeat slammed against his ribs as the rider from the south burst into the clearing, boots pounding and eyes blazing with warning. More coming. They want the girl gone, dead or alive. The rifle shot that followed answered him, sharp, cruel, a harbinger of the storm closing in. Steel and dust collided beneath the bloodied sky as warriors and settlers readied themselves for the battle to come. The woman warrior's eyes flashed fire, tempered by sorrow. This is more than a fight for survival. It's a reckoning. The land remembers, and it calls us all. The boy clutched the bundle tighter, revealing a wolf's fang on a battered leather thong beneath the cloth. A talisman, heavy with guardian spirits and ancient promises. The pistolero felt its pulse through his palm, a defiant warmth. Amid gathering shadows, gunfire erupted, carving chaos into the fading light. The pistolero drew his revolver with a brim set to his jaw, stepping into the shattered twilight like a man willed by something both fierce and fragile. The girl's cry rose, a howl of pain and defiance, steel against the encroaching night. Behind the clash, the cloaked figure emerged, staff tapping a rhythm older than the land itself. His voice rasped through the smoke and fury. The blood spilled here is but the beginning. Far beyond these fields, a darkness gathers, ancient, relentless. Only those willing to cast aside old hatreds will endure. The pistolero's eyes burned with grim resolve as he cradled the boy bleeding in his arms. Survival was no longer a measure of firepower, but a test of mercy, courage, and the will to bear the weight of a land that refused to forget. The girl's eyes shimmered with fierce light as the storm of violence consumed the valley. And beneath the blood-red sky, the ancient shadow whispered its deadly promise. The wolves of the frontier were awakening, and the reckoning had begun. The distant crack of a rifle shattered the fragile stillness. Flames of chaos igniting along the dusty ridge, where warriors and settlers confronted one another, beneath a sky bruised with dying light. The pistolero's hand tightened on the worn leather reins before he slid from his horse, boots sinking into brittle earth, every nerve taut like a drawn bowstring. The boy's figure darted forward, eyes wide but fierce, clutching the worn bundle to his chest, as though it contained all the last hopes of this ravaged land. The pistolero stepped decisively between the boy and the gathering storm of raised rifles and sharpened spears. "Hold!" His voice rang across the tension, a harsh command tempered by desperate resolve. The settlers hesitated, fingers frozen on triggers, while warriors lowered weapons ever so slightly, the weight of bound grudges suspended in the balance. Slowly, he unwrapped the cloth, revealing a cracked flask stained with time and earth, a vessel that held the bitter scent of sage, an echo of ancient medicine whispered by desert winds. Kneeling beside the crucified girl, he tilted the flask to her cracked lips. Her breath caught faintly, a fragile thread barely brushing life. Her eyelids fluttered, a feeble sob wrenched free from her, hope threading through the darkness. Around them, silence deepened, a fragile accord binding these wary souls. The female warrior who had once spoken now stepped closer, eyes fierce but shadowed with reluctant gratitude. "You dared what few will," she said softly, voice trembling with sorrow and respect. "Mercy is a dangerous bridge here." The pistolero's gaze flashed to the horizon, where dust spirals signaled the approach of darker forces. His heart pounded the relentless rhythm of a land perpetually on the edge of war. Then the hawk returned, its wings cutting the scarlet sky. Its cry shredded the silence, sharp and urgent. Clutched in its talons was a tattered scrap of leather, fluttering to the ground near the girl. The woman's eyes widened at the sight. Ancient runes, inked deep into the totem, spoke of old pacts and sorrows. The boy suddenly staggered, a sharp pain folding into his chest beneath the bundle's weight. His breath hitched, and blood darkened the dusty earth. The pistolero caught him swiftly, cradling the youth against the cold wind now sweeping through the valley. The boy's wide eyes locked with his, full of silent questions and shattered innocence. A new rider burst into the clearing, dust swirling around him, eyes blazing with urgent warning. "More are coming," he spat. "Hunters from the southern ridges. They mean to end this by any means." Gunfire erupted then, fierce and merciless, tearing through the twilight as warriors surged against settlers in a brutal symphony of vengeance. The pistolero's revolver gleamed with deadly promise as he stepped into the storm. Teeth clenched against the roar of violence that threatened to swallow them whole. In the midst of the chaos, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Cloaked in tattered robes, a figure moved with unnatural grace, staff tapping deliberate rhythms against cracked stone. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of forgotten sorrows and unsaid curses. His voice crawled over the din, low and ragged. "The land remembers all debts. This blood is but a summons, a herald of shadows, gathering far beyond this battlefield." The female warrior met his gaze, unflinching. "If fate demands this reckoning, we will stand. But the old wounds cannot be healed without sacrifice." Amidst the melee, the boy's fingers relaxed around the bundle, revealing a wolf's fang pendant, dull but radiant with an ancient power. The pistolero's palm closed over it instinctively, the weight a solemn reminder of promises made in blood and shadow. Explosions of gunfire flared beneath a sky now swallowed by night. The crucified girl's cry shattered the clamorous noise, a sound threaded with pain, defiance, and wild, untamed fire. Every man, woman, and child was caught in the ferocious tempest blowing through the frontier's fragile peace. The pistolero's eyes never left the boy's face, marked by sudden pallor, a youth forced into a deeper abyss than blood or war. Then, as bullets sang their deadly tune, the hawk's mournful cry drifted again on the wind, a warning that something older, darker, far beyond human grudges awaited them down the blood-soaked trail that had just begun to burn. And beneath the crimson sky, where the lines between enemy and guardian vanished, a cold wind whispered a harbinger's truth. The reckoning was no longer coming. It had already begun. The hawk's piercing cry hung in the burnt sky, fading into the twilight that draped the barren horizon. The pistolero felt the weight of every heartbeat as time fractured around them, a delicate pause bracing the storm yet to come. Painted warriors tensed like drawn bows on the rocky ledge, their silence a language carved from grief and centuries of bloodlit memory. Below, the settlers formed ranks, eyes sharp and unyielding, hungry for vengeance, yet tethered by the thinnest veil of restraint. The Pistolero's gaze locked on the crucified Apache girl, her form suspended in a cruel mockery of hope and suffering. A flicker of breath stirred beneath cracked lips, a faint pulse threading tenuous life through shattered bones. The boy who had raced forward, clutching the fragile bundle, crouched beside her, eyes scalded with fierce determination beyond his 10 years. His hands trembled as he held tightly to what he carried, a worn talisman wrapped in faded cloth and whispers of ancient power. Before words could find sanctuary, a low murmur rippled through the warriors. The female warrior, who had stepped down from the rock, fixed the Pistolero with eyes blazing in muted fire. "This child," she said quietly, voice roughened by years of loss, "carries the weight of more than blood. The old ways still stir beneath this land's broken skin. Mercy is not weakness here. It is a battle itself." He nodded, the heat of the day long leached by the creeping chill of night. The Pistolero stepped toward the girl, fluid and reverent, uncapping the cracked flask with deliberate slowness. Sage and bitter herbs unfurled on the wind, a scent that spoke of struggle, redemption, and lives fast ebbing. He tilted the flask to her lips, watching as the shreds of life clung desperately to the fragile vessel of her body. Her eyelids fluttered, and a thin, ragged breath escaped like a threadbare prayer. The warriors exhaled a collective relief, the settler's fingers loosening just enough to betray uncertainty. The fragile accord teetered on a knife's edge. Yet above all, the gathering tension thickened as hooves thundered closer, thunder rolling in the grip of dusk. Suddenly, the sharp crack of a rifle split the air once more. The settlers stiffened, guns rising as if to split the night in twain. The warriors braced, spears poised, war clubs gripped. The Pistolero's muscles coiled, the years of bloodied trails tightening his resolve. From the shadows, the rider who'd warned of the southern hunters burst forward, dust swirling like ghosts around him. "They come with fire and death in their eyes," he spat, voice harsh as flint. "They mean no peace." Chaos exploded like a flashfire. The boy stumbled, clutching the bundle as a terrible weight bore down on his frail frame. A dark stain spread beneath his fingers, sudden, ruthless. The Pistolero lunged forward, catching the youth before he could collapse, blood blooming fierce against the shattered earth. "No," the Pistolero breathed, voice broken but fierce. "Not tonight." The battle erupted in a furious tempest, the sharp crack of gunfire mingled with screams and the clash of ancient weapons. The line between hunter and guardian blurred beneath a sky bleeding crimson, as life and death wove their grim dance. Amid the skirmish, the cloaked figure emerged silently from the gathering shadows, staff tapping slow rhythms on cracked stone, like a dirge for a dying world. His robes hung tattered and stained, his face veiled in darkness deeper than night itself. Yet the unspoken power he carried chilled the very air. "The reckoning has begun," he rasped, voice threading through the violent symphony. "These wounds are but the prologue. A gathering darkness tests the very soul of this land. The woman warrior's gaze met his without falter. If the land demands sacrifice, then so shall we answer. But this cycle may break only when old hatreds are set aflame and forged anew. The pistolero's eyes drifted to the boy, the fragile carrier of hope now trembling in his arms. The faded leather thong around the boy's neck revealed a small, crude wolf's fang, pulsing faintly in the dying light. The warrior's silent secret was a pact older than any grudge, a thread binding the present to shadows forgotten. As the battle surged around them, the girl's eyes snapped open, no longer glazed and lost, but alive, fierce, aching with a burning light that ignited the dusk. She screamed, a raw howl carved from pain and defiance, cutting through the din like a call to arms. The wind tore across the valley, carrying the harbingers of war and the fragile promise of mercy intertwined. The pistolero gripped the wolf's fang tight, whispering against the uproar, "If mercy must walk through hell's gates, then so shall I." As gunfire erupted anew, lighting the horizon with hellish tongues, a shadow slipped beyond the chaos, silent, unseen, ancient, and deep beneath the bloodied sky, the weight of that shadow settled. The harbinger's whisper wound through the desert dust. The wolves awaken. The rifle shot's echo faded into the night as the pistolero cradled the wounded boy in his arms, his breath ragged with exhaustion and determination. Around them, the valley had become a tempest of shattered peace, gunfire sparking like wildfire, horses' thundering hooves on brittle earth, warriors and settlers locked in a deadly dance that blurred the lines between enemy and protector. But amidst the chaos, something fragile endured, the faint pulse of life in the girl's shallow breaths, the muted but fierce hope that still lingered in their battered souls. The cloaked figure, staff tapping ancient rhythms on the ground, stood silently at the edge of the fray, watching the storm, with eyes shadowed beneath his hood. His presence was a grim reminder of the power sweeping through this scorched land. Power born from old wounds and deeper reckonings yet to come. The woman warrior beside him tightened her grip on her war club, her gaze fierce but tempered by a hard-won sorrow. "They come not just for blood," she whispered across the roar, eyes locked on the pistolero. "This fight marks a turning point. The land itself calls for a reckoning. But we can choose what we become in its fire." The pistolero's jaw clenched as he shifted the boy to cradle him more securely. The youth's skin was pale beneath the grime, breaths coming shallow and uneven. But his spirit burned fierce still. The wolf's fang hung heavy on the leather thong around his neck, a talisman that seemed to pulse faintly in the bloodied dusk. "You hold more than medicine in that bundle, boy," the pistolero murmured, voice rough but gentle. The boy's gaze lifted, unwavering. "Old remedies," he said, his voice breaking but resolute. "Secrets pass through shadows and prayers. They say it might buy her time, and maybe a man. Chance for peace." The pistolero nodded slowly, eyes flickering to the crucified girl as she finally opened her eyes wide, no longer vacant, but blazing with fierce, unyielding light. Her raw cry pierced through the chaos, a wild call that seemed to challenge the very darkness gathering on the horizon. Around them, the warriors rallied, their spears raised as shields of last defiance. The settlers steadied their rifles, faces etched with grim resolve, but minds turning, perhaps, to a future beyond this endless cycle of blood and vengeance. The first wave of attackers surged forward, shattered silhouettes against the stars. Yet the Pistolero moved like a living wall, a guardian between hope and oblivion. Every breath he took was a promise etched in dust and fire. Mercy was a line worth crossing. Even here, where ghosts of hatred lingered in every shadow. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the night. The woman warrior leapt beside him, deflecting a quick blade with the heavy war club, eyes shining with fierce determination. The Pistolero's revolver spat fire, each shot a defiant hymn against the dark. The battle raged beneath a sky bleeding its last light. But in the eye of the storm, time slowed. The boy gasped, weakness pulling at him, but the Pistolero's hands were steady, whispering words learned from years of bitter trials. "Hold fast," he urged, his voice a steady anchor amid the chaos. "We carry the land's mercy in our hands. We fight not only to survive, but to forge a new path." The cloaked figure stepped forward through the maelstrom, his staff raised high, tapping a slow, steady pulse against the cracked ground. "Let this be a reckoning not only of blood, but of soul." His voice echoed with ancient weight. "Those bound by the old blood and fierce courage shall rise from these ashes." The girl, weak but fighting, reached a trembling hand toward the Pistolero. He took it without hesitation, their fingers interlocking, a silent pact forged of pain, hope, and the will to endure. As the battle reached its crescendo, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting long, golden fingers upon the blood-streaked earth. The attackers faltered, their resolve fracturing against the unexpected strength of unity. The warriors held firm, the settlers lowered weapons, eyes searching for cause beyond hate. In that fragile moment of quiet triumph, the Pistolero glanced across the valley. The boy's breathing steadied, color returning faintly to his cheeks. The girl's fierce gaze softened, a fragile peace blooming where once there was only despair. The cloaked figure lowered his staff, shadowed eyes meeting the Pistolero's with a nod of solemn respect. "The wolves awaken," he spoke softly, "but so do the guardians. This land is changed, scarred, but alive. And from these ashes, a new story begins." The Pistolero exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years lift like dust on the morning breeze. Around them, the quiet stretched, a promise, a beginning. The old hatreds would not vanish overnight, but here, in this battered valley, mercy had taken root. The boy looked up, eyes bright, with the first true hope he had known. The warrior woman offered a wary smile, the first crack in the armor of grief. And the girl, once crucified and broken, now risen in fierce defiance, breathed steady and strong. Her story, no longer one of pain, but of survival and the fragile strength born in the crucible of love and courage. The relentless sun rose, casting away the last shadows. The frontier remained unforgiving, but its heart beat anew, with mercy, with hope, and with the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to walk the line between hunter and guardian. In the vast and wind-swept wilds, where echoes of the past still whispered on the wind, the saga came to its close, and the land waited, patient and eternal, for the wolves and the guardians to rise again.